question was, what are some of the main goals of the program? Like, what kinds of things will we study to see if it's been successful, like graduation rates or?
Well, the biggest thing that I know the Harvard folks are going to look at is the testing data and how the control groups versus the treatment groups did on the scores, but not just this year. Obviously, you know, they're going to look at how did they do last year, and you know, they've got to tease out a lot of other factors because there's certainly a lot of there's so much going on in the DCBS schools these days that you really got to figure out, you know, what are the effects here. But I think one of the things, this is something that Professor Fire has a very good track record of doing, and you know, he's an economist and knows how to tease these things out. And so we're very confident that we'll get, you know, great analysis out of it. I saw your hand before.
Questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, one on that. I guess aside from the teaching about financial things, what are you hoping this is going to teach them for future when they're not in high school? What's going to motivate them to keep, you know, trying to do well if they're not getting those monetary incentives, and how is that going to?
Sure. Well, the answer to that, I mean, hopefully the high school programming, and it's one of the things that, as I said at the beginning, it's not just DCPS. It's just about every urban school system in America. The weakest parts of their systems tend to be in the middle schools. And so that's why it was targeted in middle schools. Now, by no means is this, you know, fix all that we're doing. It's more, this is an opportunity that came up with Harvard. They approached us and said, you know, we'd like to do this, and we're willing to get a substantial amount of money and do a lot of this research if you're interested. And it's something that, you know, the more data we can create, the more that we can learn about what motivates, and in some cases, you know, it's potential that this program will say no, it has no effect. You know, things that don't motivate our students, we can learn from that and better tailor the education options and programs that we're giving our students.
And then my second question is, how does you said that they've already done this for a year in New York? So do they have data on what? Yeah,
so they're closing year 2 in New York, and so the results from the New York New York program will be forthcoming. I don't know their timeline.
Do they have results from last year as far as test scores, or they didn't release that?
They didn't release that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering what sorts of behavior elements were on the tracking sheets?
It's more general. What we worked out with the schools at the beginning, most of our schools have school-wide behavior rubrics, and you know, sometimes it's very simple. It's respect yourself, respect others, respect your environment. Other schools, you know, different teachers have different classroom rules and things like that. And so when we met with the faculty at the beginning of the year and kind of talked these things through, we really had everyone enunciate specifically what are the positive behaviors that a student should demonstrate to earn one of these points. So participation in class, you know, raising your hand, no teasing of other students, no gum in the classroom, you know, things like that. But it varied from school to school. But on the tracking sheets, the teachers are, you know, there's a reminder rubric on there, but the teachers are able to simply just you know, check a box. And did this student present exemplary behavior today? Yeah. You know, yeah.
I'm just wondering whether, if you know, do kids get immediate feedback about their behavior on the day that it occurs when the teacher marks that they misbehaved?
It varies. Some of our teachers, you know, they're doing it subtly. They feel like that's how it works better for them in their classroom. Other teachers have certainly reported using it as an integral part of their behavior management systems and saying, you know, you just lost your capital gains point with that. So it really varies by classroom, and I think that is a great question, but there's no uniform way in which it's being done. It's really just how the teachers want to integrate it. Yeah.
Here in Maryland, we talk a lot about, or at least at the state level, they've been talking about behavior and the subjectivity of determining a student's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Was that taken into account, and how were teachers trained on to be able to determine and identify good behavior or bad behavior? And are you guys concerned about the subjectivity between schools or across schools, or
Sure.
even within class or across classrooms?
Sure. So a couple things that at the beginning with the training of the teachers, you know, we engaged them first just to make sure that we were getting the 5 metrics that worked for that school that the teachers thought were the important ones to capture. But then we also had the conversation on behavior and what does that behavior rubric need to look like. You know, we ended up then modeling behaviors for them and having them, you know, everyone mark in at least one of our sessions, I was the student. I would do things and have teachers, come to a consensus and make sure that there's a common understanding of what violating that rubric looks like versus what upholding that rubric looks like. But that being said, absolutely. And what's interesting, I think, is part of the reason some of our schools opted for an average behavior instead of just that marking up to 30 and above, or however it works for the periods, is because of this recognition that Miss Jones could be a phenomenal science teacher and her kids are just there and no behavior problems, but that same group of kids can go into Mr. Smith's class and they can tear up the place because Mr. Smith isn't providing an engaging lesson. He doesn't have any management techniques in the classroom that can hold those kids in check, and so and that just sort of happens naturally. And so in answer to your question, the way we took behavior was across all classes to get at as best we can the idea that students will simply react differently to different teachers.
And how long was the training for the teachers in preparation for this?
So we did it a while ago. We made at least 2 visits to the schools for full afternoon-long faculty meetings. So that was about, depending on the school and the size of the faculty and things like that, about 6 hours, we'll say, on two different days, and then a third for a number of our schools where there was still the issues we talked about. Are we tracking correctly? Are there any other issues? So we always made ourselves available, but we got to a point pretty early on where it was running smoothly and everyone was kind of on board. Yeah.
I just want to know if any thought has been given in the event that the program proves to be effective. How will it be sustained? How can it be sustained financially?
Sure, and that's a great question. And I'm going to have to punt on that one and say, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. At this point, we're focused on doing it right in these first 2 years so we can learn as much as we can from the program. Yeah?
What is teacher feedback in New York? So you've done it 2 years there. What is the teacher feedback about?
I have only interacted with DC, so I can't speak to New York or Chicago. The feedback we've heard from DC, it's I would say it's been mixed but positive. Certainly, we did this and the teachers have come to us. We're doing a lot of focus groups now at the end of the year. The teachers have said, these are the elements we'd like to change, and some of that at some schools it's we think the metrics can better get at the things we want our kids to be doing. Others have said, some of the other criticisms, the transparency of the metrics in some cases. A couple of our schools have set up metrics that ended up being a little bit convoluted for students, and so they've said, our students aren't getting why they're earning points in this category as well as they are in the other categories. But I would say overall what we've heard from our teachers is positive.
Would there be a place where I can read about that? Is that is that included in the research anywhere? Is that for New York, Chicago? Or should I contact them?
I would.
Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, no. I'm trying to think. Not really. It's not the real stuff that the Harvard folks are diving into is what kind of effect this has on student achievement.
Right.
And so there hasn't been, and I don't think Harvard's really going to focus on the teacher side of it. Certainly, we view our constituents as the students and the schools, within the schools, the teachers, and so we're always in the schools, listening to teachers, talking to teachers, trying to make sure that they have the support they need to do the program and do it effectively. But most of that is more sort of anecdotal feedback that the Capital Gains office has taken. There's nothing really written down on that. Yeah?
I have 2 more questions.
Sure.
First, are you only going to be, is Harvard only going to be interested in school outcomes, or down the line will they look at how these students work?
Absolutely student level. This is absolutely student level, and how the students react to the program. And the longitudinal stuff we were saying before is, in the future, we're not going to simply forget these students. We really want to know certainly the short-term effects, but if there are any long-term things that we can learn from this, and it may be positive, it may be negative, who knows, but they're definitely committed to doing that.
And also, if it does prove to be very successful, is there any chance that it will spread out to suburban and rural areas?